10 years ago, the passing of Akosua Boateng shattered the peace of the Boateng estate in East Legon. The house, once filled with the fragrance of blooming jasmine and the sound of laughter, became a mausoleum of silence. As Nana Boateng sank into a paralyzing fog of grief, often spending entire nights staring at his late wife's empty vanity, his ambitious personal assistant, Serwaa, saw not a tragedy, but a golden opportunity. She moved into the vacuum of his life with calculated sweetness, bringing him tea he didn't ask for, and organizing files that eventually allowed her to control his shadow. Slowly and systematically, she began erasing Akosua's presence from the mansion, moving portraits to the attic and replacing traditional warmth with cold, modern luxury. In Serwaa's eyes, Nana's 5-year-old daughter, Baaba, was never a child to be loved. She was merely a biological obstacle, a living remnant of a former queen that needed to be permanently removed from her path to total power. Before we dive into this gripping tale of betrayal and redemption, please subscribe to ensure you never miss a story like this. Tell us in the comment section, what would you do if you discovered a family secret that changed everything? Within a year of Akosua's funeral, Serwaa had successfully transitioned from Nana's indispensable assistant to the new mistress of the house. She orchestrated a wedding that was the talk of Accra, a lavish affair that filled the estate with high society climbers and influencers who cared only for brand labels and the prestige of the Boateng name. Serwaa was beautiful in a sharp, intimidating way, but her beauty was like a polished marble floor, strikingly cold, unyielding, and dangerously slippery for anyone who didn't watch their step. She moved through the East Legon mansion with a proprietary air, replacing the vibrant, colorful kente hangings Akosua loved with oversized, gilded portraits of herself in designer European gowns. Baaba, now 6, was a constant, stinging reminder of the legacy Serwaa could never truly overwrite. Nana doted on the girl, seeing Akosua's fiery resilience in her small face and promising her that the Boateng shipping empire, from the busy docks of Kema Port to the industrial hubs of Takoradi, would one day be hers to command. These promises fueled Serwaa's secret envy until it curdled into hatred. Having recently given birth to a son, Kofi, she was consumed by the obsessive belief that the Boateng kingdom belonged solely to her own bloodline. She began to treat Baaba a pest, a remnant whose very existence was a threat to her son's future inheritance. The tension in the house became a physical weight, felt most acutely by the servants who huddled in the kitchen, whispering about the new madam's lightning-fast temper and the way she looked at the child. Baaba began to experience a series of accidents that were terrifyingly convenient: a glass of water spilled on a polished floor just as she ran past, a loose carpet on the grand staircase, or accidentally being locked in the dark pantry for hours. During their late-night dinners, Serwaa would whisper expertly crafted poisons into Nana's ear, claiming the girl was becoming unstable, dishonest, and malicious due to the trauma of her mother's death. Blinded by Serwaa's performative affection and exhausted by the demands of his global shipping business, Nana slowly began to doubt his own daughter. He failed to see the predatory hatred hidden behind the shimmering lace of his wife's designer gowns, even as Baaba grew more withdrawn and fearful. The opportunity Serwaa sought finally arrived during a massive, noisy renovation of the mansion's sprawling backyard. Nana Boateng was away in Kumasi for high-stakes traditional council meetings, leaving Serwaa in absolute, unquestioned control of the estate. The mansion was a chaotic construction site, dominated by deep, muddy trenches for a new Olympic-sized pool and an underground wine cellar that was to be the pride of their social circle. The air was thick with the scent of diesel, damp red clay, and freshly turned earth. That night, Serwaa dismissed the household staff early, claiming she wanted a quiet, intimate evening with the children and demanded total privacy. Only Kojo, the quiet gardener who lived in the secluded boys' quarters, remained to finish his chores by the flickering yellow light of a portable generator. He was a silent man, often invisible to the family, which allowed him to observe the shadows that moved within the house better than anyone else. He saw Serwaa through the kitchen window, her movements quick and frantic. Serwaa gave Baaba a glass of warm milk laced with a potent, tasteless sedative she had procured secretly. As the girl drifted into a deep, unnatural slumber, her small breathing becoming shallow, Serwaa carried her limp frame into the humid backyard. The moon was a sliver of bone hidden behind thick clouds that promised another torrential Accra downpour. She approached a dark, secluded corner of the excavation site where the wine cellar's foundation was being laid, a place where the heavy concrete would be poured first thing the next morning. With a strength fueled by greedy madness, Serwaa lowered the sleeping child into a narrow, wooden-lined trench. Using her bare hands, she pushed wet earth and construction debris over the girl, her gemstone-encrusted nails breaking and bleeding against the red Ghanaian soil. She covered the child with a heavy sheet of plywood and shoveled dirt over it in frantic, rhythmic motions, her breath coming in ragged gasps of victory. "You are just like your mother," Serwaa hissed into the dark, her voice a jagged whisper. "A ghost, and ghosts belong deep in the red earth, where they can't take what belongs to my son." She had no idea that Kojo was watching from the pitch-black shadows of the tool shed, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw the burial and watched with horror as Serwaa smoothed the dirt with her designer heels, marking the spot with a heavy stone. But Kojo was a man from the margins with no influence in the world of the East Legon elite. He knew Serwaa's power. He knew she could have him disappeared or framed for a crime before the sun even rose over the Atlantic. He stayed in the shadows, paralyzed by a fear that would haunt him for a decade.
When Nana returned from Kumasi, he found the mansion in a state of orchestrated, frantic panic. Serwaa was distraught, her hair disheveled and her eyes red from hours of fake crying. She spun a detailed, harrowing tale of how Baaba had wandered out of the mansion gates during a lapse in security and had been snatched by opportunistic kidnappers. She even produced a meticulously forged ransom note she had written herself, demanding an impossible sum from the Boateng accounts. The search lasted for agonizing months that turned Nana's hair grey almost overnight. He spent millions of cedis on search parties, private investigators, and bribes to local informants, scouring the busy markets of Makola and the dense, unforgiving forests of the eastern region. They found nothing but silence and dead ends. The shipping tycoon's health began to decline. He stopped eating, stopped attending board meetings, and withdrew from his oldest friends. Serwaa played the role of the grieving, supportive stepmother to perfection, comforting Nana in public while privately redecorating Baaba's bedroom into a gold-leafed nursery for Kofi, effectively erasing the girl's existence from the house. Kojo, however, could not find a single moment of peace. The image of that plywood lid being covered by the red earth haunted his every waking moment. 2 days after the burial, under the cover of a torrential downpour that sent the construction crews scurrying for shelter, he had sneaked back to the site. He dug with an animalistic energy, his fingers raw, until he reached the wood. He found the girl still breathing, her heart a faint rhythmic thud against the absolute silence of the earth. Knowing he couldn't bring her back to the mansion without ensuring both their deaths, he took the unconscious girl to a cousin who drove long-haul trucks across West Africa. "Take her to Cape Coast," Kojo begged, handing over his entire life savings. "Just get her away from this woman. Let her live, even if she forgets the name Boateng forever." We are halfway through this intense journey of survival. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel for more African stories that touch the heart. Also, let us know in the comments, do you believe a mother's love can transcend the grave? 10 years passed, turning the fragile child into a striking young woman with a regal presence. In the salt-sprayed, historic streets of Cape Coast, a young woman known as Abena worked in a busy chop bar near the castle. She was strikingly beautiful, with eyes that held secrets she couldn't articulate, even to herself. The trauma of the burial had locked her past behind a heavy, rusted door in her mind. Her uncle, the truck driver who had raised her with rough kindness, had told her she was an orphan he found abandoned on a lonely road near the border. But as she reached her 16th birthday, the memories began to leak through the cracks of her consciousness. In her dreams, she saw a magnificent house with white pillars and smelled an expensive floral perfume, a scent that made her lungs tighten with a phantom pressure. She would wake up feeling the weight of the earth on her chest, gasping for air in the humid night, her fingers clawing at her sheets as if trying to dig her way out of a dream. These nightmares grew more vivid each night, accompanied by the fleeting image of a woman with emerald cold eyes. One afternoon, a wealthy businessman from Accra walked into the chop bar wearing a signature Boateng shipping lapel pin. When Abena saw the golden anchor entwined with a cocoa pod, a bolt of mental lightning struck her mind. Boateng. The name tasted like home, like salt air, expensive lace, and a father's deep booming voice calling her name in a garden. From that moment, the identity of Abena began to dissolve. She began to save every single cedi, working grueling double shifts and selling handmade trinkets to tourists outside the castle walls. She was Baaba again, and she was coming back to Accra to claim the life, the inheritance, and the justice that had been stolen from her.
Accra had grown louder and more crowded, but the Boateng mansion remained a monument to cold, imposing opulence. Nana Boateng was now a frail man, his health failing rapidly as he suffered from mysterious ailments his doctors couldn't explain. Ailments exacerbated by the stress of living with a woman he no longer recognized. His spirit had been shattered by years of what Serwaa called bad luck and her constant nagging demands to sign over his remaining assets to Kofi, who had grown into a spoilt, reckless and entitled young man. Baaba didn't storm the gates with a shout. She was her mother's daughter, strategic, patient and observant. She used her hard-earned savings to forge a new identity and applied for a job as a temporary caterer for Serwaa's upcoming 50th birthday bash, the social event of the year that was being billed as a golden jubilee of the Boateng legacy. When she walked through the servant entrance, Auntie Mantha, the faithful housekeeper who had served the family since before Baaba was born, dropped a tray of crystal glasses. The girl didn't just look like Akosua, she was her resurrected image, standing in the same kitchen where her mother used to bake. Baaba placed a firm, gentle finger to her lips, silencing the old woman's gasp of shock. "I am just the new girl from the catering agency, Auntie," she whispered, her voice carrying an authority that made Auntie Mansa tremble with a mixture of fear and divine hope. Auntie Mansa grabbed her hand, her eyes filling with tears, recognizing the birthmark on Baaba's wrist that no forgery could replicate. Throughout the week of frantic party preparations, Baaba moved like a vengeful, silent ghost through her childhood home. She saw her sun-drenched room, now filled with Serwaa's mountains of designer shoes, and saw her father sitting alone in the garden for hours, staring at a water-stained photograph of a little girl that he kept tucked into his traditional cloth. She wanted to run to him, to fall at his feet and tell him she was alive, but she knew the predator was still in the house. Serwaa was more powerful than ever, shielded by a web of lies and a staff that feared her every whim. As the party approached, Serwaa grew increasingly on edge, frayed by an unnameable sense of doom that seemed to hang over the house. She felt a presence in the corridors, a cold draft that followed her through the marble halls, and the faint sound of footsteps when she knew she was alone. She caught fleeting, ghostly glimpses of the new caterer in mirrors and felt a bone-deep shiver. Those eyes were too familiar, too knowing, and they seemed to watch her with a silent, terrifying judgment. "You," Serwaa barked one afternoon, cornering Baaba in a dimly lit hallway near the kitchen. "Where are you from? I didn't authorize your hiring and I don't like the way you look at me." "I am from the dust, madame," Baaba replied, her voice low, steady, and entirely devoid of the fear Serwaa usually inspired. "To the dust, all secrets eventually return, no matter how much concrete you pour over them to keep them down, no matter how deep you think you've dug the hole." Serwaa's face went a sickly, ashen pale. She dismissed the girl with a trembling, manicured hand, but her heart raced like a trapped bird. That night, consumed by a manic paranoia, she went down to the old wine cellar with a heavy flashlight. She poked at the walls and the floor, her mind unraveling as she searched for signs of the dead returning to claim their inheritance. She even began to claw at the stone she had placed there 10 years ago, her screams muffled by the thick underground walls. Meanwhile, Baaba had finally tracked down Kojo. He was an old man now, living in a small, leaky shack on the outskirts of the city, working as a lowly gateman for a nearby compound. When he saw her standing in the moonlight, he fell to his knees, weeping with a mixture of terror and relief. "I saved you, Baaba. I saved you from the red earth of that cellar. I couldn't tell them back then. She would have buried me right next to you." Kojo reached under his meager bed and handed her a rusted tin box he had guarded for a decade. Inside was a jagged, death-stained plywood scrap he had kept as a silent witness, the physical proof of a crime the world had chosen to forget, still bearing the dried red clay of the foundation.
The night of the party was a staggering spectacle of gold, silk, and the most expensive hand-woven kente Ghana had to offer. The elite of Accra were all there, sipping vintage champagne under the massive crystal chandeliers of the Boateng ballroom. Nana Boateng sat on a throne-like chair, looking frail, disconnected, and ghost-like amidst the celebration. Serwaa was at the height of her perceived glory, wearing a diamond necklace that cost a king's ransom, her smile brittle and desperate as she moved among the guests, trying to ignore the feeling that the walls were closing in. As the ceremonial toast began and the music swelled, the lights in the ballroom suddenly dimmed to a jarring absolute blackness. A massive projector screen intended for a glowing tribute to Serwaa's charity work flickered to life, but it wasn't a tribute. The screen showed a high-definition video Baaba had recorded in the wine cellar just hours earlier. It showed Kojo, his face lined with the weight of 10 years of silence, holding the blood-stained plywood and testifying in a clear, shaking voice to exactly what he had witnessed on that construction site 10 years ago. Then, the camera panned to Baaba herself, standing in the very spot where she had been buried alive, her eyes burning with a righteous, ancient fire that seemed to pierce through the screen. 10 years ago, a woman buried her daughter alive in this very house to steal a fortune and a name that wasn't hers. Baaba's voice boomed through the professional sound system, the bass vibrating through the marble floors. The house lights slammed back on with a blinding intensity. Baaba walked regally into the center of the ballroom, dressed not as a maid, but in a simple, elegant white dress that perfectly mirrored the one her mother wore in her most famous portrait hanging in the foyer. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of guests dropping crystal glasses and the frantic clicking of phone cameras recording the moment for the world to see. Serwaa screamed, a raw, primal and terrifying sound, like a wounded animal backed into a corner. "You are dead! I put you in the ground with my own hands. I watched the red dirt cover your face until you stopped moving. You are a ghost! You can't be here!" The guests gasped, the recording of her confession already being shared in real time across social media. Nana Boateng stood up, his legs shaking with a sudden strength fueled by adrenaline and shock. "Baaba, my daughter, my child is alive!" He reached out, his hands trembling as tears streamed down his face. Serwaa tried to bolt for the heavy mahogany exit, her silk gown trailing behind her, but Inspector Mensah, who had been positioned at the doors by Baaba and Kojo earlier that evening, stepped forward from the crowd. "Mrs. Serwaa Boateng," Mensah said, his voice as cold and final as iron, "you are under arrest for attempted murder, child endangerment, and the decade-long fraud of the Boateng estate. The earth has finally spoken, and it has told your story." As the heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around her wrist, Serwaa looked at Baaba. The girl did not look back with the hatred Serwaa expected, but with a profound, terrifying pity that cut deeper than any blade. The empire Serwaa had lied, cheated, and attempted to kill for was gone in a single echoing heartbeat, dissolved by the very truth she thought she had buried forever. The mansion was quiet once more, but for the first time in a decade, the air felt lighter, as if the house itself had finally exhaled a long-held breath.
Nana Boateng's health improved miraculously once the psychological poison of Serwaa's presence and the weight of the kidnapping were gone. They didn't sell the house or hide from the past. Instead, they transformed the entire wing of the estate, the site of the cellar, into a modern sanctuary and school for orphan and displaced children. Baaba never forgot the cold, damp smell of the earth, but she no longer feared the dark. She was the girl who came back from the grave, a living testament to the fact that while greed is fast and ruthless, the truth is patient, enduring, and ultimately eternal. No matter how deep you bury a lie, the truth will always grow through the cracks. Thank you for reading until the end. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more powerful narratives. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Can a person truly ever run away from their past?